Welcome to Recovery His Way. I'm your host, Tom Reynolds. Glad to have you today. We're on the campus of His Way in Huntsville, and we've been addressing the subject of the 12 steps. We've looked at the 12 steps from a biblical point of view, and then we've had the privilege of being able to investigate through the lives of men who have walked it and are walking these steps to see how those biblical ideas are really practiced in real life. And today we have one of those real-life testimonies. Garrett McDaniel's with us. Garrett, good to have you.
Thank you.
Garrett graduated about 5.5 years ago, and it's great to have him back on campus. It's good to see you. You don't look a day older since you graduated.
It's good to be back.
And so it's been, I know we haven't seen each other a lot. However, I get to follow you on Facebook.
I'm glad you're getting those things.
And so I get to kind of see how you're doing. You got married, you got a kid, and all that kind of stuff's happening in your life, and your career's going well, and all that. It's just really neat to see. It's rewarding for me to be able to sit back and watch that. So thanks for sharing that on Facebook. I know a lot of people don't speak well of Facebook, but it has some good things.
I can't take credit. It's my wife who actually shares this stuff on my Facebook, but I'm glad you got to see them at any rate.
So I guess I want to begin with just kind of your journey. I mean, I've known you for a while now. I'd like to maybe share just a brief description of kind of what your recovery journeys look like, and then we'll talk more about our step.
So, as a child, I always felt like there was something different about me. I can't explain it, but I was never as content, it seemed like, with just, one toy, or, I always had to have the whole set and then the other set. And then, there was always this need for me to do more or have more. And I feel like that kind of set the stage, so to speak, for my behavior and actions later on in life. Mm-hmm. And it was at a point, I guess, you get older, you turn 16, you get a vehicle, and you kind of have all this freedom to come and go, and you're not, supervised. And it was at that time when everything started kind of unraveling for me. And I started using things to make me feel different. Should I say names?
How'd you start?
Yeah. I started with smoking marijuana. I mean, I think that's the usual entry point. And it was only a matter of time before I'm literally skipping school. I'm avoiding my responsibilities to just go use the substance to change the way I feel. And I carried on like that for years until I lost my first job because I smelt like marijuana. Assistant manager of a movie theater was a great accomplishment for me. It was so rewarding. I remember getting the promotion. I was I felt so achieved, but I just couldn't let go of that that substance that made me feel different. Mm-hmm. So I picked up the pieces from that and moved on, and it's this perpetuation of I can't let go of these things that make me feel different. Mm-hmm. And eventually, the marijuana is not enough. You graduate and move on to much more intense, things, which through the gambit or spectrum, I ended up with pain pills. Mm-hmm. I'd actually suffered a really painful four-wheeler accident. Mm. I'd broken my pelvis.
Wow.
And I remember when they actually administered, pain medicine in the hospital, and I got this feeling that which led to prescription pain pills, and on and on and on. Job after job. No matter how accomplished, no matter how committed my resolve was to never use this again. I finally I've just got this job now, or I finally got, this thing I wanted or whatever. The drugs always won. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's at the point where that perpetual cycle that you almost become desensitized to it, to where it's almost like accepted routine, like this relapse, get cleaned up, get a good job, and immediately or not soon after, relapse, get incarcerated. It's almost like there was this unspoken protocol where my family knew exactly what to do at that time. We need to go pick up his clothes, we need to put the money on his book, and I felt so helpless, so dependent, so enslaved, almost disgusted in myself. And it's at that point where I really started to seek a way out, and that was the first time I'd come to His Way, which may have been 2010.
Okay.
Perhaps 2010.
Yeah. So about 12 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark. Huh?
Yeah.
And you first came to His Way. What was your first experience when you came here?
It was warm, welcoming. I mean, there's no doubt that His Way always was and always will be a fantastic place to come and feel accepted and loved, and to learn about Christ and to grow in recovery. But at that time, I wasn't ready.
What was missing?
I don't know. I wish I could put my finger on it. I wish I could go back and put my finger. Yeah.
Right.
But it's just, I have no doubt in my mind at that time there was resolve and there was commitment, but for some reason I just couldn't carry it out.
Right. And then you came back. You came back a second time. Is that right?
Yes, and then a third.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What do you think happened that eventually led to this taking root?
I remember I had gotten to a point where I felt like I had made such strides. This was the second time I was there. I felt like I had made such strides in recovery, and I was so accomplished. I felt so good about where I was at. And I went home and I relapsed again, and I was so insulted by myself. I think I even used the term with you. I feel like I've committed a great affront to myself, because there was a part of my being, there was a part of me that knew irrevocably that I was failing, I was falling back, and it was so insulting to me that I let myself, that lower self, sabotage me. And that was pretty much the end of it.
So kind of this ultimate disgust finally leads to I can't continue to live in that conflict anymore. I got to break that cycle.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to compare myself to other people. It's, I would see people that my age, and they had bought homes and started families, and here I am begging my mother for $20.
Right.
I just felt so low.
Right. So you I know you completed the program fine. I mean the third time, I guess, and graduated about 5.5 years ago. So what's happened in this 5.5 years for you? What's recovery look like for you during that journey?
Well, I left here and went to Dana's.
The transition house.
Transition house, yes. And that was very beneficial for me, because although, as a grown adult, you don't want supervision. Sometimes it's needed. So that provided me just that little extra, stretching room to move on and progress. And I stayed there for years, and eventually, I don't know, things just kind of fell into place. I got a good job. And then I got married and had a kid and beautiful boy, and just there were things in the world more important than me at that point.
Right. I think that's a profound realization, is when you can honestly make that shift from me being the most important thing on the planet to something else, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so a lot of times we'll give lip service to that, but then we watch our behavior and it looks just like that. But at some point we can genuinely, have the responsibility of a wife and a family and a child and all that, a career, and those things be meaningful enough that they kind of become more valuable to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, I appreciate your journey, and I mean, you look so great, and I just love hearing what God's doing in your life. You know, this 10th step that we're talking about says that we continue to take a personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. So I want to kind of think about that for a second. How has that step, particularly in your recovery, been an important part of your recovery journey?
Yeah, and the 10th step, that is the first step where you're actually sort of, walking, you're sort of living it. It's not just about, you're being told to do one single thing. You're actually developing, a pattern or and you're continuing.
Right.
But for me, I mean, the 10th step is critical because if my ego goes unchecked, I'm in trouble. So I can't allow myself to be disrespectful or to be unkind to someone or to be frustrated without realizing what I've done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of my own checks and balances within myself, because when I'm in charge of things, without checks and balances, it doesn't end well.
Right. And that's true for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. How do you kind of monitor that for you? I mean, taking this personal inventory when you realize you're wrong, admitting it. Obviously, there has to be some point at which you kind of stop and say, okay, I need to look in the mirror on this. I need to kind of reflect on it. Is there some kind of rhythm you have to become alert to that?
I try to just catch myself in the moment if I can. I try to be aware. I know what the feeling of frustration feels like. I know it even before I'm I know what it feels like coming. And I try to catch myself becoming frustrated or becoming angry or even anxious or anything, and try to just be aware of it in the moment. But there are times where at the end of the day I may be just reflecting on the day and realize I wasn't, I was in the wrong there, and I need to go issue an apology.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think formally, like actually sitting down and writing it would probably be the best format, but I've got to admit I don't usually sit down and write it out. But.
Right. And I think, obviously as you begin anything, kind of like what you mentioned, I mean, the first really 9 steps are kind of working steps. And you kind of really, the 10th step begins the maintenance process, right? Begins the point at which now I've put this practice into place. Now I got to continue to repetitively practice it. And this personal inventory becomes the way in which I keep it repetitively practice in my life. And really those first 9 steps kind of all culminate into that. And so as you start making that transition, I think you get, you can get a little more away from the formalization, whereas, step 4, you're making a list of everything. Step 5, you're sitting down with someone talking to them, you're making an inventory of people you need to make amends to, you're writing those things down, all that. And you probably writing it down would be good, but at some point it's about just kind of a habit of it, kind of a practice of it. It sounds like you're doing. And,
that's why they say progress and not perfection, because it really is just a constant state of progression. I mean, I'll never be to the point where I don't have to take an inventory. That's just not attainable.
Right. And I think that's important. I think, and having regular intersections in our lives, obviously you're talking about, if I know it in the moment, I feel it building.
Yeah.
That's a great one where you just kind of catch it in that moment. And then sometimes it's, that moment when you're kind of maybe wrapping up your day, you're reflecting over your day, maybe you're driving home from work, you're thinking about what's happened during the day, and you start reflecting over it, becomes one. I know some of the others I was thinking about is even having a time in the week. And one of the things I think is interesting from a spiritual point of view is that, Scripture gives us, this taking the Lord's Supper and coming back to God. And in 1 Corinthians, it talks about even reflecting on things and, making amends kind of in that process. And I know one of the others, I know my wife and I do a lot of times is on an anniversary, where we try to sit down and take some time to kind of reflect over where we're at in our relationship, or, a birthday, kind of saying, okay, where am I at? Having these kind of intersections at New Year's can be a good one, right? Where we kind of reflect on the past year and look toward the coming year. And it's kind of an inventory time in which I can kind of make amends where necessary, make corrections and that kind of thing. When you come to the realization that something's awry, something's broken, something's off, how have you typically gone about the process of making it right?
Usually, if I can, usually becoming aware of what's happening, I can kind of sequester the emotion, or before I commit, physical shortcoming, or actually, do wrong by someone, I can arrest it. But most of the time it just results in an apology.
Okay.
Yeah. A breath, and just taking a second to realize myself again, and move forward. And apologize if necessary.
Right. I think it's so important, because a lot of the loss of sobriety really becomes that buildup of not apologizing once or twice or 3 times and then 20 times and 50 times, and pretty soon I have this backlog that becomes resentment and bitterness and all that then leads me back down that path. Right.
And apologizing is really checks the ego really fast too. It kind of gets everything back
right
out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as you think about your ongoing recovery process, how has keeping inventory been important to that? How is it obviously you've had a track record of 5 or so years here in which you've kind of, maintained well. How has this been an important part of supporting that?
I feel like it's critical. Just going back to the checks and balances. Without this, it's more of a measure of like personal growth. I feel like, instead of just, measuring my sobriety in days or years or whatever, it's an actual inflection of what my state is, and how I manage it.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of interesting that you pointed that out, because a lot of times we think of recovery as I just mentioned, 5.5 years, talking about in terms of longevity, right? Mm-hmm. But what about depth?
Right.
What's the depth of that? And is it getting deeper as I go?
Because the root problem was me all along. So, it doesn't matter. And I don't even really measure my sobriety in days or years. It's not that I don't have a desire to amass a collection of numbered coins or anything like that. It's just that here and now is the only time I have to be sober, is right now. Mm-hmm. Right now is the only time I have to actually do work, to do an inventory or to realize myself and my shortcomings. So right now is all that matters.
Right. How has this journey impacted your marriage? Obviously that's kind of an interesting, because you kind of have this very intimate relationship that you haven't had before. You're living with somebody, you have this connection with another person. How has marriage impacted your recovery process?
That's a good question. It's not been easy. It's been a learning process. It's been a growing process. There's certainly been a myriad of times that I was wrong. But it's definitely, I feel like, helped me grow more solid in my recovery, and more solid just in being, a productive person. Mm-hmm. It's been good.
Right. Yeah. Good. Well, and I think that's part of the beauty of it, is you have such an intimate accountability partner. Yeah. That their lives are depending upon your sobriety today, and your son's life is dependent upon your sobriety today. Yeah. And there's an intimacy and accountability there that marriage and family bring that are powerful. Obviously, it's not a guarantee. There's a lot of guys who have destroyed marriages and stuff like that because of substance abuse. So, but the fact that, I think one of the beauties of your situation I love is that the journey that you've gone through of recovery, and the steps and the working and the process of dealing with your life, you can bring that into your relationship, and that, ultimately maybe those same tools can be the tools that help make for a better marriage and be a better father and those kind of things and that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in the steps. And they've been applied to a great, many modalities and situations. They're solid step. It's good stuff.
Right. I love them because they're so practical, and they really bring the rubber to meet in the road. And I think the beauty of the steps too is it helps Christians take all these points. I think all 12 steps are very biblical ideas
absolutely.
that were taught in Scripture. Jesus focused on them, and kind of give us ways to put them into practice. So many times we can kind of idealize this value system that the Bible teaches us, but we don't know how to actually bring it to practice.
Yeah.
And the 12 steps gives us a great way to practice them in all kinds of areas of life.
I mean, and even helps. I mean, feel like visualize them. I mean, put something tangible to something intangible.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, I appreciate it. It's just great. So great to see you and hear you. I really appreciate your insights today, and I want to encourage you to continue to walk these steps out, and not only be a process for your sobriety in terms of recovery, but also a great foundation for marriage and being a father, and continue to have a great career. And so proud of you, excited for your future. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching us and listening to us at Recovery His Way. If you would like to know more about our program, you can check out our website at hiswayinc.org.